Back when the first half of Bridgerton season 3 dropped, I had my theories about the direction that the show could take the storyline with the Mondrich family and how, to me, it was a necessary bit of storytelling because it tied to the core messaging that centered on Penelope and Colin's character arc through the season. But by the time season 3B dropped, things didn't pan out quite the way I'd expected them to, and that left me a tad bit frustrated. Which made no sense to me because I do love Alice and Will and their children, and I couldn't quite put the pin on why I was so upset. It took months of me slowly turning it around at the back of my mind for me to finally realize the problem I had with the Mondrich storyline in season 3. And the reason why it left a lot of viewers dissatisfied at the seeming lack of connection to the rest of the plot in season 3. You see, the problem with the Mondriches in the season was pretty simple. Their writers forgot their why. Now, to explain what I meant by my opening statement, it is important for me to explain why I didn't think the Mondriches and their storyline were well served in Bridgerton season 3. But to do that, I need to state clearly that yes, I know the show is called Bridgerton. However, I am also very aware that it is an ensemble show, and that for me is one of the strengths. I'm a nosy viewer when I watch historical stories like this, so I'm actually quite pleased with the show making the very conscious choice of expanding their area of focus so we don't only follow the Bridgertons. We also get a clear look at the lives of the Featheringtons, the Cowpers, Lady Danbury, Madame Delacroix, and the Mondriches. For me, it makes the world feel more lived in. Yes, the Bridgertons are the stars of the show, but other people are also the stars of their own lives. And the subplot is what has me invested heavily into this world. Now, I am aware that this is not the same for everyone. Some viewers hate that the show doesn't just focus on the Bridgertons, and you know what? That's a pretty valid nitpick to have with the show. I just personally rearranged my expectations after seeing back in season 1 that Bridgerton was always going to give us an inkling into the lives of the other members of the ton to further push the plot forward and often to show their connection to the main family at the heart of it all. This might either be from their friendships with them or the similarity of the themes that they have to navigate. And this theme bit is what is most important for the Mondriches because you see, back when I thought I had an idea where the show wanted to go with the third season, the Mondrich storyline made sense to me. Because at that time, I felt it fit the theme of Penn and Colin's personal struggle within the season. And it was meant to be a reflection of that, a way to show what our main love pairing were going through, held up against another couple to further cement the point. Other than Penelope trying to break away from beneath her family's control and take charge of her own marriage so she isn't stuck with her mother and sisters as the unmarried one in the family home, season 3 also heavily focused on Penn's life work as Lady Whistledown and why it's important for her to keep it, even though it is contrary to everything their society stands for. She's a young woman who has her own money, is running her own column all underneath the noses of people who would scorn her and a society that would demand that she give it all up to toe the line of respectability. And she does not want that. It's something that we see her argue several times over with Eloise and later Colin after he finds out. Being Lady Whistledown matters to her because of the effort she's put in. How she's grown her column, the respect that she's gained as a writer because of that, how fulfilling it makes her, and also because it puts her in a position where she has power over herself and her choices. A young lady at that age having such a substantial sum who isn't dependent on pin money or a dowry, but she's her own self-made person is something that makes Penelope Featherington very powerful, given the time. If we really think about it. Colin in the season as well is besieged with his own fears and doubts, which look a bit different from Penn's. Whilst her focus in the season is to retain her life's work and have control over that, not giving up something that she's poured so much effort and even sacrificed friendships for, his, on the other hand, is on how to set himself apart from his family. Colin Bridgerton's hang up and worry is tied to how he can prove his own worth. He's a third son, which means that although he isn't going to inherit the estate or title, he's still meant to do something of note with his life. However, he doesn't want to go to the military. He isn't going to become a vicar somewhere, and so his options are pretty limited. The Colin Bridgerton we meet in the third season is floundering. He's trying to figure out who he is and what he can do and where he fits into it all, in a way that he gets to show that he is the one who is putting in the work and he is the one who is deserving of whatever rewards come as a result of that. His writing, whilst a way to share his thoughts and gleanings from his travels with everybody else, is also a way for him to put something of himself out into the world that would be judged and accepted and recognized. It's a way for him to make a name for himself that isn't tied to his family and what that family name automatically means as a way to open doors. Now, if you just had a brief thought of, wait a minute, but Benedict also feels that way, you are correct. I'll get to that in a bit when I talk about the upcoming season. But back to Colin and Pen and the Mondrichs, because if you're following my train of thought, I'm fairly certain you already know where I'm going with this. It was clear to me at least that there were similarities between what both Pen and Colin were going through and the particulars of the Mondrichs' experience, which I went into greater detail in a video I made about that. We'll leave the link to that in the description bar for those who haven't seen it yet. But we see that Penelope's desire to reinvent herself as she makes a clear separation from her family and ushers her way into a society that used to see her one way, i.e. Wallflower Pen, to seeing her in a whole new light. And this, of course, mirrors Alice's experience as she's entering the town, now that their status have been suddenly elevated due to their son's new title of being the Lord of Kent. But more importantly for me, however, is the struggle to retain her column and identity of Lady Whistledown that Penelope has poured so much of her heart and soul into. This is what is so similar to Will's insistence on not letting go of the club. And for those who might think it didn't matter, I beg to differ. The club matters. It has been as much a part of the story of Will Mondrich since season 1 as any of these characters. It was to raise seed money for the club that had Will let go of his principles and agree to the deal with Lord Featherington to throw the match, so his portion of the bets that accrued from said match could be put into getting Amy's club. It's what led to the death of Lord Featherington. The club is tied to the shenanigans that we got to experience with Cousin Jack, which is why after it was all resolved at the end of season 2, that was where Colin brought the other gentlemen of the town into. Owning the club is as tied to Will Mondrich's identity as Lady Whistledown is to Penelope, and it made sense that neither character would want to let their identities go. And then there's the bit of wanting to make a name for himself outside of his family. Because sure, the Mondrichs have now been elevated to a much higher class, but as far as Will Mondrich is concerned, that wealth and that prestige is still tied to his son, belongs to his son. Will isn't the one who just inherited the title, Nicholas Mondrich is. And to further drive it home, the distant relative that bequeathed him the title was not related to Will or the Mondrich side of the family, but his wife. So as far as Will Mondrich is concerned, this man that had to sacrifice everything to get his club up and running, it is yet another blow to his pride. His pride is the reason why he's so obsessed with holding on to his business, just like Colin is driven by his personal pride to make something of himself outside of his family. These are the seeds that the show has been planting since season 2, when he was so obsessed with investing in Jack Featherington's business until he found out that it was all a scam. The reason why I bring this up is because the show had established that this was a connecting theme between the Mondrichs and Colin and Penelope for the season. And so my expectation, and not just mine I'm sure, as I do think others would most likely have noticed, but my expectations when I'd made the connection was that in the resolution of said themes for these characters, the show would have to see it through for both parties seeing the connections between them. Especially because they had already done so partly with Pen and Alice. Two women who, like I said, were pushing for a way to reinvent themselves into their society, who were trying to break free of the familial bonds and ways in which they are meant to present themselves to the ton, based off of said family's expectations of them. Alice's discomfort in wearing her late aunt's fashion is mirrored by Pen's discomfort at having to dress based off of Portia's recommendations and preferences. And so the two of them throwing away the weight of said expectations and showing up in their own style and their own preferred way to be mirrored each other in a way that was satisfying because to me it made sense. The show having Pen be given the chance and opportunity to continue with her column whilst Will had to give up the club doesn't for me. Because part of the reason why there was that much push for Will to not run his club was because such an undertaking was considered beneath the nobility. Something that should ideally also apply to Penn, because writing a column and being her own businesswoman in Bridgerton, England should be considered beneath her due to her status in class and who she was as a woman of the time. And yet, whilst the show visibly rewards Penn by having her maintain her identity as Lady Whistledown, whilst even publicly revealing to everyone else, she gets to do so because of the gained support from the Queen. What I understood from that situation was to not cave into societal pressure and hopefully get rewarded for standing your ground, which Penelope did. Will, on the other hand, has his own storyline in that regard, leading to him caving in. Like, sure, the show can always spin it as Will needing to be more present for his kids as they acclimate to their new status and all, but it doesn't take away the fact that they had him cave. They had him give up his life work to fit into what their society demands. And it is such a weird story choice for me because with Penn and Alice, you could see how they played out the corresponding themes and resolved them in a way that the messaging was clear in how it united them and how it was resolved. But with the club, however, they didn't. Because, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, on whether or not you agree with me, but to me it seemed like it's because they wanted to give Penelope the special treatment, not really considering if it made sense narratively. Not just Penn, but Colin too, because Colin does get to become a writer and get to be his own man outside of his family name. He gets to be his own person, which I said earlier is something is desired since back in season 2. But Will doesn't get that treatment, and honestly, if things with Alice hadn't played out in that way to mirror Penn, I would have said that the takeaway from the Mondrich storyline was that life is generally unfair and the nobility have always played with different rules. And in this case, it's more of a situation of I like this person, so they get a special concession that others don't. And I would have been fine with it because, oh well, that sucks. But they did get Alice's storyline right and it matched well, which is what has me so confused. And it's why I still think that the Mondrich storyline would have been better served in season 4 instead of season 3. Because with season 4 being a focus on benefit means that the central core of their love story with its Cinderella-esque tint would have gone splendidly well with the Mondrichs. And none of the, let's do things for Penn and Colin that we got in season 3. Because there's a lot of correlations between Rags to Riches as a story and Cinderella, and I just think it would have been a nice juxtaposition to have the Mondrich family, who were previously in a lower strata, get elevated due to a stroke of luck. With Sophie, who should have been in said elevated position, but due to a stepmother scheming, was not afforded that. Benofit's story has always been one that brought classism into the mix and how easy it is for circumstances to determine who is in the nobility and who is dropped out of it. And the Mondrich's storyline would have fit right in. Plus, Benedict, like Colin, is also obsessed with making a name for himself outside of his family without taking any handouts from Anthony, which is also aligned with Will's storyline in season 3. But more importantly, I just wish that the show had a clear idea of what they wanted to do with the Mondriches, what the underlying theme of their story is, and seen it through to its successful conclusion. But maybe that's just me. Would, as always, love to hear your thoughts. So please drop them in the comments. Like this video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share this if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. And until tomorrow's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.